Hi again, folks. This is Colin Stewart, and I'm here again with Bob Englander for part 2 of our series on competency-based medical education and entrustable professional activities. Now, in our last video, we were discussing the major changes that Abraham Flexner's scathing report brought to medical education at the beginning of the 20th century. And Bob, you were just starting to talk about the reasons for a shift to competency-based medical education at the end of the 20th century. So what I'm wondering is, why all the change? What was lacking about the previous system that competency-based medical education will bring to bear?
Great, so thanks, Colin, and I think you're exactly right that we were at what I would consider a perfect storm at the end of the 20th century that really required us reevaluating where we were in medical education and thinking about reimagining the future of medical education. And the two things that made for the perfect storm mostly were the expanding notion of what it meant to be and what one needed to be in order to be a good physician in the 21st century. And the second thing was this increasing gap that was documented between performance and expectations, both at the undergraduate medical education to graduate medical education transition and at the graduate medical education to practice transition. And so it was this perfect storm for entry of competency-based medical education. But perfect storms don't result in those changes absent some champions. And one of the champions in the United States was a guy named David Leach, who was the executive director of the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education, which oversees all residency programs in the U.S. And David Leach realized that we were just not meeting the mark with the old structure and process methods of the Flexnerian model. And so he said, we really need to change to competency-based medical education. Now, I want to pause for a second and make sure that all of the listeners recognize that there is only one paradigm shift going on in medical education. You've heard about competencies, milestones, EPAs, benchmarks, other terms. Those are all just parts of this one change. The one change is moving from the Flexner model of structure process education to competency-based medical education. And I hope over the next couple of minutes just to describe to you what the central tenet is of competency-based medical education and also what the basic four-step process is to get to competency-based medical education. So the major difference between structure and process and a competency-based system of education is based on the time-outcome relationship. Structure process, the old Flexnerian model, is one in which there is a fixed time with resultant variable outcomes. So, for example, 4 years of medical school, 3 years of pediatric residency. In my case, other cases anywhere from 1 to 7 years of residency, depending on the specialty choice. 2 years or 3 years of fellowship. So all predetermined times. And the one thing that we're positive of is that when you predetermine the time, you get variability in the outcomes. None of us learns at the exact same pace, and none of us acquires skill at the exact same pace. So the notion that you could say at the end of 4 years, all of these students are equally ready to be MDs and to enter residency is a little crazy. It just doesn't happen. Competency-based medical education turns that on its head. It focuses on fixed outcomes and then allows arrival at those fixed outcomes in a variable time method. So that's the central tenet of competency-based medical education, moving from the old fixed time variable outcome model to a variable time fixed outcome model. Really important. Okay, so once you've decided that you've got to do that, how do you actually get there? How do you go from medical schools and residencies that were pretty much Flexnerian in a Flexnerian structure to what we hope will be ultimately a realization of the true paradigm shift to competency-based medical education? It requires a four-step process, and that will be the subject of our next video.